And I'm really excited about this topic that we are going to talk. Oh, we are live.
We're live.
Hello. We are live. Hello, everyone who is come on to be with us today. It's really exciting time. We are with such an amazing gentleman and his wife, Mark and Monique Jackson.
Good
Good to
morning,
have
everyone.
you. Yes, thank you. Good to have you on. And I know we have such loyal following on Facebook and YouTube. And I just want to honor all of you who have been tracking with us. It has been an amazing journey. I've been having a lot of uh, comments and messages. People are really appreciative of what we are doing here. And so it's so good that our family is expanding. Every time we have new group coming on, the family is growing bigger. And it's all about helping each other on this journey. And today we have these two amazing people who are coming to share their life with us. You are welcome once again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. The topic we are going to treat or talk about today is something that is very close to my heart. And because I do a lot of work with people in my community, I think this is something that everybody needs in every community as we choose to walk this path of restoration and transformation. And so it is a topic that is close to my heart. And I know that both of you have so much experience and understanding in this area of deliverance and transformation. And so, hey, family, we are looking forward to an awesome time with these two amazing people. However, we would like to know a bit about you. We are curious that way. We just need to know a bit about you before we start listening to what you have to share with us.
Perfect. Well, curiosity is a good thing. So I suppose if it's okay, I'll share a little bit about where I'm coming from because my journey is how I met Monique.
Wow.
As you may tell, I have an Australian accent. I live
Okay.
in Canada, but I am an Australian citizen. Well, I'm now Canadian as well. I just had my citizenship 2 months ago now.
Amazing. Well done, Monique.
And so, I mean, I grew up in Australia. I grew up in a Christian family, and I always loved the Lord. But I had my times where I went astray and did things that I probably shouldn't have done. I worked for a Christian organisation. All my life, I've worked with Christian organisations essentially. But I got when I in my 20s, I did a counselling course, and I really loved counselling and loved that area. But God never released me into that. He released me into working in the IT industry. And I now sort of understand the logic of that because we were even talking earlier with Tish about how computer people speak a different language. And how there's a lot of translation that needs to be done sometimes. We've designed machines who function their own way rather than designing machines that function the way that we want.
Oh, thank you for that.
And so there's a lot of, as I say, being a translator, you have to, sometimes talk people off the cliff. So I learned a lot about that, and God taught me a lot. He said to me, go get people experience. So as I say, I worked in IT in a Christian organization, but I wanted to be married. I desperately wanted to be married. And for about 20 years, I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, asking for a wife. And I got little hints there and there, here and there. I have journal entries of what God told me of what my wife would be like and how she would be. And every now and then I read them to Monique because they are very similar they are what God gave me for her. So in my 30s, I finally found this beautiful lady through a variety of circumstances, and that sort of set me on a path. At that stage, I needed to get something sorted out in my Christian life.
Wow.
Do you have anything on that, honey?
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Canada, so I'm Canadian by birth, but I also have my Australian citizenship because I lived in Australia for 10 years. So I also grew up in the Christian home with that foundation and Christian education, and most of my jobs within a Christian organization or in serving anyway. I did a lot of kind of hospitality work, but I did training for a nurse. So I did my training all in Canada, and then I moved to Australia. and worked in Australia for 10 years as a nurse. And the reason I moved is I had met an Australian guy, which was a different Australian guy. And he was actually best friends with Mark. And I did marry Martin, and we were only married for a short period of time. And Mark was the best man at that wedding. And we actually were in a tragic car crash, and I survived the crash, but my husband did not. And so Mark and I, because it was his best friend, we caught up. We kept catching up and chatting with each other. And 4 years later, I married the best man, quite literally. And so that was how, in that journey of him praying and praying and praying, he's watching his best friend marry this amazing woman, thinking, I want her for a wife.
I actually even asked, who is now my mother-in-law, I actually even asked her, do you know any other good women you can set me up with?
Does she have any sisters or something?
Little did I know that she would become my mother-in-law, later on. But it was like she went, oh, no, I don't get involved with other people's lives that way.
Yeah, so that's part of our journey in that. And even after we got married, we really spent a lot of time seeking the Lord, because we knew we wanted to, God had said to Mark, when you want to leave the rat race, all you have to do is leave. And we're thinking, well, you can't just leave. How do you pay the mortgage? How do you do this? How do you do that? All that sort of stuff. But really, God was really challenging us to take that huge step of faith. And through the circumstances of my first husband's passing, we actually were giving the reasoning, or the financial ability to be able to step out in faith. But we actually made the step before we knew that was actually going to come our way. So, because it was actually a massive battle. That's a whole nother story. So so we made the step of faith and worked in a ministry together in England for 2 years. We thought we were going to be there longer, but due to visa situations, we ended up in Canada. And that's how we ended up coming to get involved with Life Springs Ministries.
Yeah, it was. We sort of found Dr. Ron on the internet and started chatting to him. Started doing the
Tuesday night webinars,
and he identified that there was something going on there, and it's been a friendship and a relationship that has grown from there, and we're deeply appreciative of Dr. Ron and Adina for the opportunities that they give us as well, and for the encouragement as a father in Christ.
Wow. And we both did their year-long facilitator training program in two separate years. We couldn't meet it in the year together, but we did it 2 separate years. So that was part of our getting more deeply involved with Life Springs Ministry.
And that was the odd thing, because in England, the ministry we'd worked with, we both did the course together, and we both had the same status and the same level of experience and understanding, although we are different people and we approach things from a different angle. But when we came here to America, to Canada, that's where I am now, working with Dr. Ryan, it really has restored what we thought had been lost in that ministry.
Amazing. Dr. Ron is doing great, bringing all these amazing people to us week after week for some time. That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining. I mean, you have actually clarified what the best man is, why you are called the best man. That's been clarified. That's a good one, actually.
Yeah, I quite literally married the best man.
The best man, imagine. Anyway, we thank God for everything you've asked for, and you have received your beautiful wife. And then you are on this journey, and you are handling a part of the restoration journey, which is very key to our growth and development. So we are going to talk about Freemasonry, and how do you say the other one? Mithraism. Mithraism.
Yeah.
So Freemasonry and Mithraism. Can you tell us what they are and why we need to work on get rid of them?
Yeah. Well, if it's okay, I want to just do a little bit of the big picture, and then I want to work back to that, if that's okay.
Amazing. Yes.
So When you look into coaching or counseling or any of those forms of people helping, one of the essential things that they look at a lot of the time is the idea of values. And a value simply is, well, what do you value? What is important to you? And different people have different values. Some of the conflicts that we have in relationships is because you have this value and I have a different value. And sometimes those values can be in conflict. And individuals can have values and businesses can have values as well. When you join a business, often you're asked to sign paperwork that explains that, I will submit to these values and I won't go against these values. For instance, I like honesty in people. I dislike people who are dishonest. So that's a value that I have. And, values aren't necessarily good or bad. You may have a value of being on time. But what can end up happening is that if you're on time, if you have such a push to make things on time all the time, then you can miss things. You can miss the value of being at peace and being at rest.
You could have a value of wanting to have the dishes done before you go to bed so that things are clean in the morning. You don't have to wake up to it.
Yeah.
Value, like my husband, of it doesn't really matter.
Right. Okay.
So that's how things can work in a marriage. And sometimes those are the kind of values that sometimes you just have to let slide. I don't always have to have my value met in that way. Whereas,
Okay.
he
That's
honors me by
interesting.
doing it sometimes.
That's a good place to start life from, knowing that we all have different values, knowing because we come from different backgrounds. So
Yeah.
that's a very good place to start from. Thank you.
And Christians in particular, we have particular values. We value worship. We value our God. We value, being able to worship.
Sorry.
And sorry, what's that, Trish?
Yeah, we are okay. Good to go.
Yeah. So one of the problems we have in the Christian church nowadays is how much of the culture that we live in do we allow to influence our values? And, when you look across the Christian church, there are a whole lot of different denominations that approach this different ways. There are some, and I sort of divide it up roughly into four. It's like a spectrum. There's sort of four different categories. There's the category of some people are traditional. They like what has come from history, what has been handed down. They like, they like hymns. They like stained glass windows. They like, they like to the rituals of, if you get into the extremes of the traditional area, we're looking at sort of like the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church, and where it's what we call bells and smells. They have incense and they have ringing the bells, and they have a cantor. They have a very strict way that a set program of how things are done.
Yeah.
So that's sort of on the traditional end. And when you come a little bit further this way, you have the conservative end. And that's probably what a lot of people have experienced. These are your Episcopalian churches, your Anglican churches, to a degree, your Baptist churches. These are people who, they've taken on a little bit of the culture, but they will not let the culture define who they are. And they have, they have traditions of their founding fathers that they draw upon. If you look at the Anglican Church, it goes all the way back to the 1500s. And again, there is a set program of, in Australia, in the Anglican Church, we have an Australian prayer book, which was created from the Book of Common Prayer in England. And it has very clear lines of, well, this is what we do. In every service, we stand up and we read the prayer book and we do things the same way. And this isn't right or wrong. It's just an observation across Christianity.
Yeah.
Then you have the progressives. And the progressives take on a bit more of the culture. Now, just to be clear, I'm not talking about progressive liberals. I'm not talking about the LGBTI movement and that sort of thing. What I'm talking about is that they take on more of the culture, and they will accept psychology. They will do preaching that talks about psychology. They have less of a structure as far as the service is concerned. They have more of a way of, what they would say, allowing the Holy Spirit to move. It's a little bit freer in as far as structure is concerned within the church.
Right.
And then you have the other end, you have the radical end. where you have people who are, they're very full on interchange, and these are your Bethels and your Hillsongs, and they have the, the loud worship music. They have a concert-like atmosphere and this sort of thing. And so there's this spectrum all the way across the Christian church, and again, not right or wrong, but it's just a spectrum of different expressions, and all these expressions have come from, well, how do we read history? How do we look at our values? How do we inherit what has gone before? And how much of it do we incorporate into our services?
Mm.
Yeah. So when you look at a house, you lay the foundation first, and then you put the walls up, and then you put the ceiling on, and then you put the roof on.
Yes.
And everyone knows that if the foundation is faulty, then it can affect the entire house. And the Christian church has grown up over time, and we have a particular structure. But you've probably seen people, if there's a brand new house that's been built and they've just laid the concrete, a little boy will go over and write in the concrete,
Yes.
do something to sort of, put their mark on it.
Or even walk in it. That's what my brother did when my mom and dad were laying the barn foundation, and he got stuck with his rubber boots. And he was quite surprised, because the guys with the whirlybirds that are getting the concrete to be level, they were walking on it, but he just stood there and sunk in, and he was only 4. And so they said, well, we got to get the camera first.
Wow. Yes.
So the whole thing of the foundation, so our adversary is quite wily, and Wile E. Coyote, he is able, if he could put his stamp or his mark in the church, he may not be able to stop the church. But if he can throw some bad seeds in there or influence the church in some way, then that's going to create confusion later down the track. Then that is something that he's going to try and do. And so that's really what we're talking about here. Is we're talking about, back in history, there are a couple of figures within the Christian history who we sort of revered, but they had a little bit of a dark side to them. And, one of the things that Satan does well is that if he can't stamp something out, then he'll try and water it down.
Right.
And that's what he's done, is he's created mixture. He's brought things in, and we'll talk a little bit about Mithraism and particularly Constantine, who was part of that. But this sort of brings up the whole discussion of, well, secret societies and secret cults, areas of society. Now, by their very nature, they are secret. So, so it's hard to find out information about these organizations, but there have been a lot of people who've come out and who have got converted to Christianity and who've talked about them and talked about what's actually taking place behind the scenes. And we now have a much clearer picture that in these organizations, some of them are deeply vested in Satanism and Luciferianism, or at least paganism. And so, that sort of brings us to the whole idea of secret societies.
Right. Wow. Do you want to add something to it, Monique, before we go into secret societies?
Nope.
I think he said it all.
Amazing. This leads us into how we end up doing the course for Mithraism and Freemasonry for life ministry. So.
Yeah, because Monique and I are doing, there are two, there's Mithraism and there's Freemasonry. And Mithraism is sort of an older form. Let me put it this way. I'm an Australian. We have a bird in Australia that's called a bower bird. And there's particularly a blue bower bird. Mm-hmm. And blue bower bird, what he does is that he builds a nest for his mate to see if the mate will actually, mate with him. And what he does is he goes and he finds everything in the neighborhood that's blue. So he looks for blue milk bottle caps and blue straws and anything blue he finds, and he builds a nest with all these blue things in it.
Oh, I've seen it before in a documentary.
Yeah. Okay.
Beautiful bird. Yes. Okay.
And what happens is that his mate comes along and she checks the nest. And if he's done a good job, then she mates with him. If he's done a bad job, then she doesn't, But he picks these blue bottle caps and everything from all around the neighborhood, And Freemasonry, just to put the context in there, is what I call a bower bird religion. It borrows from everything. It borrows from ancient Egyptology. It borrows from Wicca. It borrows from witchcraft. It borrows from Egypt. It borrows from Christianity. It borrows from the Phoenicians and Babylon and all these sort of things, and it puts it into one big ball. A very nasty ball when you sort of find out the things that they're in. But as I say, so that's sort of the ultimate, but they even borrow from Mithraism. So I suppose the place to start really is talking about Mithraism, what it is and how it works.
Wow. So this makes so much sense. So Freemasonry is because you will find their root in almost everything.
Yes.
And then it makes you think, oh, they are just like this and it's okay. Oh, they are Christians and it's okay. Oh, they are like that and it's okay. And it sounds a bit like what we are seeing with the New Age.
Yes. And they borrow from that too.
Yeah, sounds like the New Age without the oaths and all the stages of whatever. You know what I mean? It sounds a bit like that. I call it a hot pot of food. Like everything goes in, like it's like a cauldron.
Exactly. And the thing is too is that a lot of Freemasonry they claim goes back to Solomon's time. And Solomon, we know, David was very righteous and he loved the Lord, but Solomon in his later years, he went a bit astray. And so some of the foundations are said to be that. And a lot of this is rooted in history too. If we talk about Freemasonry apart from Mithraism, but with Freemasonry in particular, a lot of it was around the Enlightenment era of the Renaissance that was happening in Europe. So you had that sort of historical era of new ideas and new thoughts. Humanism was involved in that time. Rationalism was involved in that time. The rational Enlightenment. Historically in that, and mixed in with all of that was a rediscovery of a lot of these pagan works. And again, Freemasonry in various forms has been around throughout history, but it was really sort of formalized in some forms around about the late 1700s.
That is like a reawakening of what it was before.
Of darkness. And traditionally the Masons were the ones in the town, like you had stonemasons, and they were the ones that actually created buildings and structures.
Yes.
But behind it all, they had to have a form of a union or some way to to band together so that they weren't disadvantaged. We talk nowadays about blue collar and white collar. The blue collar people being the workers and the white collar people being the people who make the work done. And in some ways, in Mithraism, it was the blue collar workers who were the stonemasons who were being disadvantaged, and they wanted some way just to form a union, so to speak, to make sure that they weren't being disadvantaged. But that union got influenced into in a religious way, and these occult ceremonies began to be introduced into those organizations, and some people became got heavily involved in Freemasonry. And the thing is, right, when you start with Freemasonry, one of the first things that you do is that you actually curse not only every part of your body, but you also curse your ability to see in the spirit. And that therein lies part of the problem.
So, do they really know that they are cursing, or is it wrapped in a beautiful what do you wrapper?
Yeah.
Is it nicely wrapped for them so they don't know they are cursing? Or
absolutely.
Is it
even on their pamphlets, it'll have that the real secret of Freemasonry is making good men better. And so much of their if you think of Shriners, which is a level of Freemasonry, it's all about the hospitals and doing good deeds and fundraising and providing money for people to build their buildings and put the roof on and things like that. So it's all about doing good things and good deeds, making good men better. And that's part of all of, so you see the good stuff. Right, that's what they want to portray, is all that good stuff, and they say, well, we're not a religion, because they're just men who want to do good deeds and make the world better.
Isn't that build back better, which is one of the phrases that we've heard a lot over the last couple of years.
So the idea they project to the people is to make them better. They are here
Yeah.
to help you be a better person.
You
Yes.
know,
Of course, everybody wants that.
it's interesting. I watched a BBC documentary a couple of years ago, and you can probably still find it out there. And it was about the Freemasons, and they're a misunderstood organisation. So the BBC wants to go in and show exactly how these things work, but we can't show you everything. And so I was very curious about, okay, so what are they not going to show people? They went into the lodge, they showed everyone exactly how they dress and some of the rituals that they do and so forth. The thing that they missed was the curses that you bring upon yourself from the very first level. And the first curse that you bring upon yourself is to, your spiritual sight and ownership is to the lodge. And so you immediately link yourself into this system, which spiritually blinds you. And to be perfectly honest, the first three levels of Freemasonry are called the blue levels. And the Blue Lodge, I think they call it, those three levels, you curse every major organ of your body. And you also align yourself. And most people don't go beyond those levels, but the damage is already done because you're blinding yourself to spiritual realities.
So how is this done? How is it done? Is it like you are made to swear this oath? They read them out to you like the little letterings on your bills that you don't necessarily read?
Mm.
Mhm.
They have, it's what's called an esoteric religion. So you don't know the next level until you get on it. There's a lot of mystery and a lot of intrigue. Like I've trained as a counselor, and what I've learned is that anticipation is good.
Right.
If you have somebody who is dwelling on the negative, then they can be very distressed by that. But if you can flip that to being a positive and introduce anticipation, then people can be curious about it. And to a large degree, that's what they've done in Freemasonry, is that you go in there not knowing the ritual you're going to go through that everyone has gone through, and so they essentially, you read, you are in the first level, you have to roll up one of your pant legs and you have to expose your breast. You have to put a hood on. And again, that's a spiritual thing, the hoodwink. We talk about being hoodwinked. Well, that's a term from Freemasonry where they actually put a black bag on your head and a noose around your neck. And they, at one stage, pull the black cap off because you're exposed to the light. But it's not the light that we know, it's the light of Lucifer, which you don't find out unless you get to the 30th level and above, because there are 33 degrees in the Scottish Freemasonry, I believe it is, and 13 in the York Rites. So again, you don't really know what you're getting into, but there's anticipation there, and so people do these rituals, and they are, they basically say to them, "This is, you read this back. If I divulge any secrets, may my," and it's fairly graphic language as to, what will happen to you if you talk about the secret organization. But they make loud noises behind you. They introduce trauma into you. There are parts where you enact out death rituals and all sorts of things. So it's a fairly, intense process, but it's done in the context of a brotherhood. So you might be getting curses, but yes, I have my brothers. So again, there's a lot of mixture in there. We know brotherhood is a fantastic thing in the right context. But if everyone is all blind together, won't they fall in a pit?
It sounds very much like the tree of knowledge of good and evil, where you step into it because you want to do good and you want to be seen as being good and you want to be a better person, so you want to improve on your life. And brotherhood, because there is networking, there is love, there seem to be love, there seem to be oneness, there seem to be fellowship. That's what everybody is looking for. We are all seeking to have one, and yet you are made to go through these rituals. And this is where it gets really, really tacky, because these rituals are not against you alone,
Yeah.
but against your bloodline.
Mhm.
Yes.
How does this work against us in the bloodline? Because from what you are saying, most families have been exposed to Freemasonry. In fact, I don't even know how many families on this earth would say their bloodline is not linked to Freemason one way or the other, and Mithraism, because Mithraism is the older version of Freemason, if you can say that. So families have been involved in this for ages, and its effect in us today is still quite prominent.
Mm.
Uh, how are we to know that we have had Freemasonry or we have it in our bloodline?
Mm. It's a good question.
The history of
There's
Smith raising and Constantine.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the way that you're going to know, and I'm going to get back to Freemasonry in a moment, but part of the way you're going to know is a lot of illnesses are related into Freemasonry. You can
A lot
have
of
illness,
illness,
yeah,
right?
so sicknesses, diseases, because again, a lot of the curses that you make disease. You curse yourself that that your brain might be exposed, or that that your chest might be opened. And some people literally, when we're going through the deliverance course, some people literally feel particular parts of their body moving within them. And that's part of the way. I mean, we're 6,000 years. If you take a creationism point of view, we're at least 6,000 years downstream from Adam. If you believe in evolution, we're a lot longer than that.
Of
But in that 6,000 years, there's that generational, what we call generational backwash, really, where you may not have been involved in Freemasonry, but your ancestor might have been involved with Freemasonry, and you might have several ancestors involved in Freemasonry. And so this all passes down through the bloodlines. I mean, when you look at the Bible is inherently all about blood and lineage and DNA, and there's a lot of emphasis that's shown that the sins of the fathers are visited to the third and fourth generation. Now let's put the context in. God blesses to 1,000 generations. His intention was always that we would expand into this universe and grow into what God has for us. But on that third and fourth generation, that iniquity of your ancestors have done something wrong. And think about this: if you are within that 3 or 4 generations and another ancestor does that, then it extends in another couple of generations.
wow.
And so, as I say, so a lot of sicknesses and illnesses are a way that you can to discern these things. But most people know that they're sick, and most people know that they have a problem. They have an eye problem, or they have, and every particular level they curse a particular part of your body. So sometimes there can be a specific level of Freemasonry that is really appropriate to that particular person. For me, one of the levels is about work. I always seem to have problems finding work or keeping. Not that I was lazy or anything like that, but there seemed to be this distrust that would grow between me and certain employers rather, and so I left on good terms, but it sort of followed me around. So yeah, it's very
Wow.
interesting.
I was reading this book last night on healing the family tree, and he was talking about how um, people who have gone through enslavement or have gone through colonial rule and all different groups of people, and how they are affected by those structures that have been put into their lives. And these structures are like constructs that are on them, and is you have to really renounce them. So it makes you talking about blue collar job and white collar job. And I see that in my community a lot, because we were brought up to do white collar jobs because blue collar jobs are looking down upon. And a lot of our parents stepped into the colonial masters' footsteps. And so they were the people in the white collar jobs, and a lot of others were in the blue collar. And then you grow up, and all you know is that you must go to school, go to university, finish university, and join the rat race of white collar job, or you the fallen ones who join the blue collar jobs, or the less higher rank would join the blue collar job. And this is quite it's quite normal. We overlook it. We don't know why we are not able to start businesses, or we are not able to build empires for ourselves. We have no idea why. But it's the enslavement, colonialization of the mind and the community that actually births this. So what you are saying about Freemason, this construct that you have taken upon yourself, you allow it to remain in your bloodline, if it's not dealt with, it
Yeah.
actually goes to 1,000 generations to affect the family.
Mm. Well, third and fourth to affect, but God blesses to 1,000, doesn't he?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And see, that's the thing, is that with these secret societies, how involved are they in the community? Like there's a lot of symbolism around Mithraism and Freemasonry. For instance, with Mithraism, the crescent moon is a common theme, and that represents the moon god. The moon god we know as Allah. Now, Islam is very heavily involved in Allah.
Mithraism. Mhm.
Yeah, and the stars. You'll see in Mithraism, there are 7 degrees or 7 levels, and each one of those is representative as what they understood the planets to be at that stage. Now, we've sort of thrown that out a little bit nowadays with Pluto and Neptune, but at the time they could see 7 stars. So, the symbolism of the pyramid, which is an Egyptian thing. If you pull out the $1 note on an American $1 note, you'll see the pyramid, and you'll see the eye. That's the other one, the eye, the all-seeing eye. How many Hollywood actors do you know who cover their eye up or do this sort of symbol and this sort of thing?
Mm.
Freemasonry is very, very heavily inculcated, involved in our culture and our environment, and particularly the entertainment industry. And again, it's a secret society, so if you want to get ahead, then you make a deal with the devil. And the cost is, the cost could be your soul. There is those verses that Jesus speaks about where he says, he talks about in Matthew 25 about, depart from me because I never knew you. I do wonder whether a lot of the Freemasons are going to be those people, or one of those people who God says, I never knew you, because you did all these things. You helped the poor and fixed society and built churches and this sort of thing. And yet they didn't know the Jesus of the Bible. They knew the Freemasonry version of Jesus, who again is a mixture or a perversion of who the real Lord Jesus is. And again, when you get to the 30th level, you find out that it's Lucifer. They actually name him that you're actually serving.
Wow. I don't know if it's Arthur Beck's book that talks about some of these things a bit in details.
Mm.
This is, what I'm remembering, I don't know if it's from any of his books, that's when you acquire a land or a place to build a city, the Freemasons are the ones who establish the church, the community center, the school, the
Yes.
hospital, the library. These are basic mountains for humanity to engage.
Yes.
So if they are the ones who are building the schools, the hospitals, they are building the church, they are building this thing, how free is anyone? Because they have taken grounds everywhere.
Mm. And again, just like the little boy who writes in the concrete, if you have a Freemason organization who is giving money, which is a trade, to a Christian church, or fixing the church buildings, the church building or the roof or something like that, we're aware of a community where Freemasonry was heavily involved, and money was given to repair the roof of the actual church. And there has been compromise in that community. So again, it's mixture again, isn't it?
The mixture. Because somebody has just asked a question, do association like Rotary clubs and Round Table and Lion clubs fall in the same category?
It's a good question, because again, they're secret societies, so discerning where they are can be difficult. I understand that there are links with Rotary into Mithraism, and of course, when you look at Mithraism, one of the rituals they do in Mithraism is actually killing a lion, and it's sort of meant to be a mockery of Jesus being the Lion of Judah. And it's like, so lions are very central to Mithraism. So you have the Lions Club, is it linked into, I haven't done enough research to be able to say with
Yes or no?
definitively. But as I say, what we have learned is in Freemasonry, when you get to about the 32nd level, there's only a certain amount of positions in the 33rd level. And so you can go off and start your own organization. And this is why you've got, the Elks and the Orange Lodge and the Tree Fellas of the World and the Knights of Pythia and all these sort of other forms of Freemasonry, because they've borrowed from the same infrastructure and the same mixture within them. But they're not the same organization. And that's, again, how some people are deceived. There are Christians out there, many Christians who are involved in Freemasonry. And when you do the research that we've been doing, what you find is that there is no, there's no way that you can be associated with this ministry, with Freemasonry, and I think still be fully loving the Lord Jesus. Jesus talks about no one can serve two masters. You will love one and you will hate the other. And so, there does need to be a separation of, if you've been into that, it would be worthwhile looking into Freemasonry and doing some of these renunciations and resigning your commission to that.
I have for those of you who are watching who are my students, and those of you who want to know more, I interviewed Aaron some time back, and he talked about how he got into Freemasonry from university without realizing it, and then when the Lord revealed himself to him, he had to come out, and battle he went through to come out, but his sister was positioned to be an intercessor for him.
Mm.
And even though he comes from I can't remember the background, but one of these Middle East religious background, his sister was pulled into interceding for him in a Christian school. And that's how he was saved from Freemasonry. And he actually ended up saving his whole family from it. It is such a subtle organization, and you may not be aware that it's even in your bloodline, but it is really in deep seated in a lot of bloodlines. But you mentioned sickness. What are some of the sicknesses, that would pick on?
Monique, actually, is there are two books that we follow. One is Freedom from Mithraism by Dr. Ron Horner, and the other one by Dr. Ron Horner is the Overcoming the False Verdicts of Freemasonry. And they're quite comprehensive books. And if you want to do those court cases, you can do them on your own. We run courses, and that's what we use as our text, so to speak. But yeah, some of the illnesses.
So in the back of the book, there's actually several pages and lists of there's different mental illnesses that can affect you, double-mindedness, bipolar, spiritual confusion, mental confusion. We talked about not being able to see spiritually or hear spiritually and that sort of stuff. And then there's the whole thing of, if underneath of witchcraft, oaths and curses, could be melancholy or oppression, being in a psychotic state, and other curses of insanity and senility, dementia, things like that. So, and then also under nervous disorders and fears, things like multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, spinal cancer, Parkinson's disease, sudden death, and betrayal and things like that. So I'm just listing some of the things. There's a lot of different stuff related to cancer that can be part of those curses. And then the different rituals and fears, like if you have fear of attack or fear of death and fear of any kinds of fear of anything. And then different things that you may have, which Mark mentioned, which was happening over his employment. So curses of your employment or personal relationships, and you can't find your favor, you keep losing favor, or you have exile from your home or your family or your job, or when you have just feeling like you're exposed, or pain and humiliation. And then things that can happen to your marriage, if you have curses in your marriage, and then betrayal, death of your marriage, insanity, and destruction in the marriage. And then financial problems of bankruptcy, whether that be in relationship or your partnership or your marriage again. So these are just, I'm just listing a few, because there's quite a few pages. So sometimes just going through that, you can go, oh wait, tick that, high blood pressure, low blood pressure, thrombosis, hemorrhage, rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes. I mean, these are all very similar things that we hear about in society. So it's so common that you think, oh, how can that be? But it's worth definitely investigating. If these are things that have been going on in your family and they say that it's genetic, well, maybe there's a root there within Freemasonry, and that's the reason why it's genetic, and getting your bloodline cleansed for that.
And isn't that the irony, is that we're told, oh, you just take the medication. Well,
Exactly.
you know, and I'm not against medication, but I am against just taking it blindly without trying to figure out what the root of it is. And often the root of these things is spiritual. You know, we listed there, big thing in Freemasonry is fear, death, you know, big themes about that. So a lot of sicknesses and illnesses, if you listen to Dr. Henry Wright, he talks about how fear is at the base of a lot of conditions. You know, it contributes to diabetes, high blood pressure, you know, whole stack of things. So, yeah.
Wow. For those of you who are listening, I think talking about sicknesses and diseases and taking medication, there is Anna Ferrell Mendes has written a book on the pharmakia and the roots of the pharmakia and how this whole thing is structured for us to fall ill. So the pharmaceutical companies and the medical systems will continue to give us medication. Is just a way of making money. And all this, we are not saying don't go to hospital. All we are saying is that a lot of these diseases have their root cause in Freemason and Mithraism, and it's worth researching a bit. I mean, as we are talking, it just came to my mind that at a certain stage in my life, my whole family, we all wore glasses. I started wearing glasses from a very young age. And then we have this kind of diseases in the family, and to blindness, from wearing glasses to blindness. And some of these things could be deep rooted. And even though I've done a lot of work in my bloodline regarding Freemason, I'm sure there is always something more to deal with, because the bloodline is quite extensive. The DNA has quite an extensive record of everything around us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And it could be overwhelming, but I hope you are going to tell us how to go about it, so it's easier on people just to be able to identify that this thing, there could be a pattern here, there could be, let's just renounce Freemasonry and get it over with.
So you mentioned Minister Anna Mendes Farrell in chapter 34 of Dr. Ron's book. He has her prayer in here that is very extensive of praying through all of the levels of Freemasonry, and that's all part. So that's all part of this. It goes. Dr. Ron has where you go through every level yourself through the first part, and then you end with her prayer at the end, which is even further extensive of the different levels, and really some of the ugliness that's there. You really have to get your spirit forward and be doing this, not allowing the soul to get caught up, because the ugliness of it, and usually have some worship music and stuff ready as well, just to be worshiping God and remembering that you're going for freedom in yourself. So that just that you mentioned her name, I just wanted to mention that she is recommended as one of the resources that Dr. Ron had used as well for finding freedom.
Thank you very much. But you mentioned about the soul. Why would we have to bring our spirit forward before doing it? Can you explain to people why it's important for the spirit to lead and not the soul?
So what we've learned is that up until recently, a lot of the renunciations that people have done with Freemasonry, they've done, it's such a detailed and specific vow that's been made for you and for your ancestors that sometimes you need to undo it in specifics. And up until recently, people have done renunciations and said, well, I've said this and now I'm undoing that. What we've found is that we take the heaven down approach. And so with heaven down, if we step into heaven, we can actually step into the courts of heaven, and we can get things overturned from heaven. Because a lot of what people do in the renunciations is that they are renouncing things from earth, but there are heavenly components and vows and oaths that have been made to higher powers that have already been executed. So that's why we need to put our spirit forward, step into heaven, and do a court case, actually removing the rights and privileges of these vows and oaths about us, and get the righteous judge to overturn what previous generations have already pledged allegiance to. And we found that, if people do Freemasonry from a renunciation perspective, well, they do get a certain amount of relief from it. It's not bad, and that's how we were taught to do it. But doing it from heaven down seems to have a much longer lasting and more effective approach on it all. Does that make sense?
It does. So I just want to explain that if you say heaven down, you are talking about doing it from the courts of heaven to remove the legal rights of Freemasonry from the bloodline, rather than just making a simple renunciation. And you also said, I always describe this transformation process as imagining an onion, and the onion rings being removed step by step. So if you have done renunciations, like I'm saying, and there is still a lot of things in the bloodline in connection to the sicknesses, then we can now start uprooting it from the courts of heaven. And even that, sometimes it's layer by layer by layer, and we have to continue to do it to remove the layers. So a lot of people, when we talk about transformation, are concerned about how much time they need to put into it. But it's for our own freedom. I mean, imagine how many times we pop medications in and out. But if you are able to deal with the things that are affecting us spiritually, physically, mentally, and all sorts, and remove them from those areas, we uproot them from and remove the seed, we are rather, setting ourselves free better than popping paracetamol here and there. Not saying not take paracetamol, just saying that there are deeper roots to some of the things that we experience.
Yes.
All right, Monique.
And that's the thing too, is that when we're renouncing things from heaven down, like we're going into the courts, we're not just undoing words that have been said, but we're undoing the legal rights behind it of the implications of what's been established. And that's the difference, is that when we step into the courts and we do that court case before the righteous judge, all the rights, the legal rights that have been against you and your family are dealt with. And so you're dealing with things on that spiritual level that, as I say, you're doing the physical renunciation, but you're also dealing with the spiritual aspects of actually getting those verdicts overturned.
Amazing. Thank you. Oh, Monique, I thought you were going to say something. Did I cut through? Sorry.
Go, Monique.
That's okay. I was just saying, thought a simple demonstration really is like mowing the grass. You can renounce, but the grass will just grow back. Where you're doing the court cases, you're like digging up the roots and starting afresh. Is kind of a simple way of doing a demonstration of that.
I like that.
And with approaching the just judge, you're actually addressing heaven. You're addressing the Father, the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. You're not even looking at what the enemy has done. Sometimes the older style of ministry and deliverance is, you're casting the devil out and talking to the devil. I mean, and not saying that that's wrong. Jesus did that. He spoke to them and said, out you go. And that's still valid. But this is a different level where it's the just judge that's doing that, right? And we're walking in repentance.
Amazing. Wow. Right. We've said a bit about Freemasonry. Do you want to say a bit about Mithraism and how
It's funny you should say that, because I actually pulled a quote out this morning from the Mithraism book. I just want to read that because that it's a nice little summary.
What book is that? Freedom from Mithraism.
Freedom from Mithraism, overcoming the false verdicts of Mithraism, and that's by Dr. Ron Horner.
Okay.
Now, Stephanie, who it will be running the Freemasonry course in a week's time with Faith, and we'll also be doing our one a little bit later, but we're going to do it as an intensive. So that will be intense because it will be 2 Saturdays of 7 hours each. Because
Wow.
the course itself is a 16-hour course, and one of the things we found that a lot of people wanted to do the books, but they didn't like doing the books on their own. So that's why we created
Right.
an environment where we do that, and there's a lot of nastiness in it too. And so just having the encouragement of other people being there, we try and mix in a bit more things about talking about the angelic and and focusing on the inheritance that God has given us, so that we're not just focused on the nastiness of Freemasonry and Mithraism. But just to throw in Mithraism there, here's the quote that I had. During the 1st century BC, a cult of Mithra made much progress in Rome after enduring persecution, when some emperors adopted the religion. Mithra became extremely popular among the Roman legionnaires and later even among the emperors. The worship of Mithra was first recognized by Emperor Aurelian, and he instituted the cult of Sol Invictus, or the invincible sun. Emperor Diocletian also was a worshipper of Mithra, the sun god, and burned much of the Christian scriptures in 307 AD. In fact, the reason why we have no full copies of the Bible predating that era was because Diocletian did such a good job that they actually, when they had manuscripts, they tore them into separate books and gave separate books to people, so that they could actually at least try and keep the scriptures alive, because it was such a violent overthrow that Diocletian did against the Christian church. But continuing on here, this enabled Emperor Constantine to merge the cult of Mithra with that of Christianity that was developing much. He declared himself a Christian, but at the same time maintained his ties to the Mithra cult. He retained the title of Pontifex Maximus, the high priest, and on his coins was inscribed Sol Invictus Committee, which means committed to the invincible sun. This new blend of two faiths he officially proclaimed as Christianity. Christianity spread all over the Roman Empire and Eastern Europe by massive persecution and brought to an end a variety of religions that flourished there. And that quote's from Crabtree, and he's written a book called Mithraism and Early Christianity, which is listed in the book there. But you can see right at the inception of a lot of the church, you have Rome. Initially, Rome was trying to stamp out Christianity, and it didn't work. And it was Constantine who had a vision. I'm using air quotes, so apologies to people who don't like those. But Constantine had a vision while on the battlefield and had a form of conversion. And as a consequence of that, when he became emperor, he said, well, let's just get these two people together. And so again, you have the mixture. And you see this even in Christmas and in Easter. Easter, there is a god of Easter, and her name is Ishtar. Ishtar dies dies in the evening, and she's reborn each day. Well, there are Christian symbolisms in that, but that's not Christian that Ishtar dies in the evening and is born in the morning. So there's this mix. The same thing with Christmas trees. Christmas trees at Christmas were supposed to be bringing the life energy of the forest. It was supposedly a lot of this was around the solstice, the winter solstice, and at the end of the year, the light grows fading. So there's that whole concept of Ishtar is dying. We need to do a ritual in order to get Ishtar rising on the morning. But with the Christmas trees, well, the trees are dying. We need to bring them inside.
Yeah.
So again, there's these little tiny bits within, even within Christianity. And when you look at the Roman Catholic Church, there's a lot of symbolism of Mithraism in them. The IHS, we call it in his service, but there are things of the invincible sun and of Sol Invictus, little tiny symbols. A lot of the Pope. The Pope wears a mitre. Now, the mitre is a hat that has that sort of cut out of the top of it. The mitre represents the god Dagon, and Dagon was the god that when Jonah was thrown over the side of the ship, they were offering him to Dagon in order to save their lives. He's a fish god, and that's why it has the open mouth on the top of the hat. You've got Monique has something about Constantine and the mythic priest.
Part of when we did our facilitator training program within Life Springs Ministry, they have a tile that teaches you about Mithraism. So some of those slides are some of the information that you're not told is what Mark was saying, is that Constantine, who we see as such a foundation of the Christian faith, was actually a Mithras priest, and he never renounced his vows as a Mithras priest. And in fact, St. Peter's Basilica in Rome is built on a Mithric temple. So the foundations of that temple. So that's, that's where Catholicism can come in with that mixture of Mithraism. They kind of can get in mixed together. And that's what Mark was saying, is some of those holy days is actually a mixture of Mithra. And so like Easter, let's fit that in with the resurrection, and Christmas, let's fit that in with Jesus' birth, when really it was probably more September sort of thing, historically sort of thing. So that's where they've taken over that. So if you think of like in the Vatican, 384 AD was when they had the last Papa. That was one of the degrees, the final degree of the Papa of Mithraism. That final degree is like the Fathers of Father, was kind of when they say that the cult of Mithras died, is what they're declaring, right? But the evidence of that is in the basilica. So if you are able to get into the basement of the basilica, it has listed all the paters of Mithras from 305 to 390 in the basement of that. And then when Constantine's death happened, in that kind of transition of how he changed Mithraism into Christianity, they called the next Papa the Pope. So that's how much where that is. And even Mark said some of the things that the Pope wears is a lot of the same, the red cap and the cloak, the long sleeves, the piping, the elegant robes and all that. That's all actually Mithras priest stuff. That was the things that they wore, and they just transferred it over to, that's where that red color is such a symbolism in Mithraism, and it just became part of the symbolism of the Pope and into Catholicism. So really just all that, the mitre staff, the Pope has the ring that, to kiss the ring, and the elegant jewels and all that sort of stuff comes actually out of Mithraism.
Even Santa Claus, he wears a red uniform, And just to clarify too, we're not against Catholics, we're not against Freemasons. These we are against the system of enslavement and the ungodly anti-Christian ideals that are behind it all. And so, we, as I say, we want people to be set free from this, but we're not sort of they're sinners and they're going to hell, sort of thing. So yeah, but it is a system that does enslave. It enslaves the mind and it enslaves the body, and it keeps you from the full victory that Christ has bought for us.
It's just incredible how much enslavement has gone around the world, and how we continue to be enslaved, yet we don't realize or recognize that we are all being enslaved one way or the other. I mean, we've seen how Christianity in the Bible was used to enslave whole communities and nations, and how if you take the continent of Africa was split into pieces so people could come, and they used a lot of this energy that they received from the so-called Christian church, which is not Christian at all. If you compare it to the early Christianity and what Christ stood for, it's not Christian at all. So what this mixture you are talking about is quite, it's humbling to know, to have this information, but it's sometimes it makes me angry, to be fair.
Yes.
Sometimes it makes me angry because it's not just one. When you look at every little corner of the earth, this thing has gone on and it has affected people, and it's difficult. As you were speaking, I'm thinking, how do you find Christ even in the midst of all the chaos that has been bunched up together? And Apostle John wrote about this in Revelation 17:7 when he talked about the woman being the great harlot of Babylon, the great mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. I was reading Anna Roundtree's book, the bride awakes or something. I can't remember the title, and she talked about the judgment of the church and the fact that the church has behaved like a harlot and a
Mm,
prostitute. And the judgment of the church is to bring the truth of Christianity out of that judgment.
mm,
And what you have just described is quite profoundly explains how the mixture has watered down what Christ came to do for humanity and has also created today a group of people who are rejecting Christianity altogether because of the mixture.
Mm.
Now, what I keep saying to my students is, do we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or do we want to find the baby in the bathwater and remove
mm.
the baby, take the
Exactly.
baby
Good
out
point. Yeah.
before we throw out the bathwater? And I think that's what we are doing, nitpicking and finding truth and bringing the truth out so we can throw out all the rubbish. But there are lots of people who are in church, and I
Mm,
know you are part of different groups and are training people. How are you to convince or to explain to a lot of church leaders, pastors, bishops that this is necessary, not
yeah.
for just the congregation, but for them, the pastors themselves?
Mm, absolutely. Yes, and I think that's therein lies the problem, is that there's a personal revolution, reformation that we need to do of looking into our bloodline, but there's also we need to look into the church's bloodline too, to a certain degree. And yeah, it is such an essential part of of just understanding how we've been blind. One of the journeys I've done over the last couple of years is, why is the church so impotent? Why are there areas of the church that just aren't able to make the breakthroughs? I looked up the verse where Jesus said, greater things will you do because I go to be with the Father. And I looked up in the Greek the word greater, because I'm thinking, is it the word greater as in more? There's lots more of us now. There was only Jesus at the time and his 12 disciples. Is it more as in there are going to be a lot more people doing greater works? Or is it capacity? Is it, the works that we do are going to be so much greater? I mean, what could be greater than raising a person from the dead? But apparently there are greater works. And the answer is yes, it's both. It's both greater, more, and greater, bigger, and it's sort of like, but we don't see that. And that's what's made me go, well, why don't we see that? Well, why we don't see that, I think, is because we've got this mixture. Now, one of the beliefs that I have is that God is creator. He is all powerful. He is all knowing. He is everything. But Satan is a created being. He's not a creator. And so if Satan can't create, he can only defile that which has been created. So in every area of life, we need to look at, well, okay, is this an area that God created? And if it is, can we restore it back to its former glory? Because that's the reverse of introducing mixture. And that's where, as I say, that's why I would, that's why pastors, I think, need to seriously look at this. And if you have a pastor who is a Freemason, then you need to be very careful of what they're teaching, because they're not necessarily bad people. But again, if they have mixture, you're going to have mixture. And if you have mixture, you're not going to experience the abundance that Jesus has, because it's false teaching. Does that answer your question? Oh, you've just gone mute there, Tish.
Sorry. Yes, it has. This is quite serious. We're talking about the Pope and even his garment alone, and we're talking about Father Christmas and how we have pushed it to our children. We're talking about Christmas and Easter, and all of these are pagan symbols, festivals, celebrations, regalia, garments, and all sorts of things. And yet we are looking for the truth in the midst of this chaos. Um, it sounds and looks like helpless.
Mm. It's like wearing goggles, isn't it? You know, you can only see a certain amount when you've got goggles on. But once you take the goggles off, you go, oh, I didn't realize I could see that as well. And that's how some of us are.
It's part of that Hosea scripture that
Yes.
says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And once you have that awakening and that, like praying for that awakening, or even inviting the angels to bring awakening within your realms or within your church, within your family, to take those goggles off, right? And once you go off, you're like, oh wow, how, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's getting that hoodwink taken off and being able to see again, and therefore having the knowledge, and therefore being able to flourish, because that's what Jesus says. He has abundant life for us to live in abundance and flourishing.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we say in our course all the time, as we say to people, you know, thank you for doing this course, because it's not just you who's getting set free. You're linked by bloodlines to your family. You are getting other people set free by doing these prayers and working these things through. And that's going to create a momentum, you know, in the Christian church of getting more people set free. I heard a very helpful diagram of when I worked for a particular ministry, and they drew a little house, a little square. And in the square, they said, you know, there's your sin that you have to deal with, but there's other people who sin against you that you have to deal with. And, you know, one's on one side, one's on the other side. There's accident and trauma, which can also influence you, and people need healing for. But there's also generational stuff as well. And this is sort of dealing with both your sin and your generational sin, because they're two things that highly influence our ability to see in the spirit and to understand God correctly as to where he's taking us and what he desires us to do.
Yeah, I like that.
As you step in, as you're like, we've had lots of testimonies from people who are doing this, and they receive testimonies like that. Someone will say, oh, my aunt such and such, da 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 da, this happened, and they're feeling better, and or they've been healed from this. Or so, like Mark said, you're stepping in for your generation. So it might seem, you might feel like, oh, little old me, and you know, the world's falling apart. But as you take your step, as you, little you, and you're stepping in for your generation, you are going to see the effects of life coming that Jesus has promised you.
And we undo things, you know, God is outside time. And one of the things that I've been learning lately is that, you know, in Revelation, worthy, worthy, worthy is the Lamb who was, who is, and who is to come. Well, we think of that because we're in this time zone, and time is important to us as the past, the present, and the future. In fact, though, in God's thing, it's all one. Holy, 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 was, is, and is to come is all the same thing for him, you know. And it's sort of, yeah, he, as I say, he wants us to be free in these whole things.
Amazing. You right.
Well, the can of worms.
We will have to pray for the church when we are done with all this. But the most important thing you are saying here, which I am going to throw out there for everyone to pay attention, particular attention to, is that we have to deal with the issues in us first. It has to be us first, constantly. And because we were brought up a lot to point fingers at people, there is a culture of blame constantly. It stops people from recognizing the power in working on yourself first before even wanting to do something. So I quite appreciate the fact that we need to heal the church first. But for us to heal the church, we need to heal ourselves first, because we individually are the church. And when we receive healing, then we are able to receive to heal the church. And so, for as we are coming to drawing to an end, I would want you to pray for the church, that we come to that understanding of wanting to heal ourselves first.
Yes.
But before we go there, I need to ask a simple question.
Sure.
What is the point?
What is a point?
Oh. I think you froze on us, Tish.
I don't know.
I'm not sure if it's us or you, but we're not hearing anything.
Oh, we're still on. Okay. Well, we might just keep praying then.
Yeah, we're not sure what the question is you wanted to ask us, but let's pray.
Well, and the thing is, I would make the point of it's very much like an airline. You know, all of us, I'm sure, have flown nowadays and gone on a plane. And when you get on a plane, and they do the demonstration at the beginning of, you know, if the cabin loses oxygen, then a small, mask will drop from the ceiling. Make sure to fit yours first before you try and help your child or your husband or whoever else. And I suppose that's really the what we're talking about here is, you know, we as Christians have to deal with our things first before we help the larger church. So we're just going to assume at the moment that it's okay for us to pray. So we're just going to pray. Father God, we just want to bless you and thank you for Tish and her ministry. We thank you for your church. We thank you for the bride of Christ that you have given us, and that for the example that you are, that has come to set us free from the sins that we ourselves had tied ourselves up in. Father, we ask, would you please release your awakening angels to those people on the call, that they would know and that they would understand exactly what it is that that is within their bloodline, that they would know where they need to go and the help that they need to get. Father, we ask that you would bless and that you would release them from these curses, that you would release your understanding, that you'd release your wisdom, that you'd release the seven spirits of God to draw people into a proper relationship with you and to expose to them the roots of what is going on. But we ask, we just bless you. We bless you for all that you do. We thank you that you have a plan for our life and you have a plan for unraveling the enemy's attacks on our life. And so we just bless you now in Jesus' name.
Amen. Sorry, I lost you for a while, or you lost me.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it happened. We it seemed to be still recording, so we just assumed to keep praying. So we'll see what happens on the recording.
Well done. It's still on. So amazing. Thank you so much. Wow, this is really, really awesome. Thank you. I was thank you so much for hanging on and for the prayers. Um I know that a lot of people here are wondering why they should do all this when, I mean, the life is sweet, life is great. They are working and making money, and so there's no point for this. But we know the importance of this. And I hope that the people who stayed on would come to realize that it is important to deal with these things so we can walk in more freedom as a people, especially wanting to establish the kingdom of God on the earth. We have to do this.
Amen.
So, Monique and Mark, it has been awesome having you on today. I have been blessed, and I know that the people tracking with that have also been blessed. Thank you all, Facebook family and YouTube family who came on to join us today. And I will just say bye bye to all of you. Let's say bye bye to them, and then I'll end it. But stay on a bit, please, so we can have a chat.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bless you. Thank you for
God
your
be with you. Bye.
bless you.